Moving from academia to industry is challenging. Dear listeners, welcome to the Life Career Job Podcast. Join us as we explore the inspiring journeys of STEM PhD scientists who have successfully transitioned from academia to the dynamic world of biotech, biopharma, VC, and beyond. Discover the diverse roles of our guests as they open up about their current and past positions. They shed light on their day-to-day responsibilities, the impact of their work, and their work-life balance. Whether it's in research and development, leadership roles, or even investment banking, each episode provides a unique perspective on the thriving opportunities within these roles. We'll also bring you expert advice on everything from how to dress for an interview, how to negotiate your employment package, how to ask for a promotion, and beyond. Life Career Job is a platform that we are building to help you navigate the challenges of finding your dream STEM job and building your ideal career path so that you can have the whole life that you want. We hope to serve as a beacon of guidance and inspiration in the tumultuous seas of STEM career path exploration. I am your host, Dr. Yamina Bershish, a passionate advocate for career advancement and the creator behind the very successful Dr. GPCR podcast and ecosystem. I obtained my PhD in biochemistry at the University of Montreal. This was followed by 2 postdocs, one at the Rockefeller University in New York City and a second at the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland. Less than 11 months before COVID-19 hit, I moved to a senior scientist position at a small biotech company here in the Boston area. Since then, I've worked in sales and marketing at a global life sciences company and in commercialization at a nonprofit organization. And I am now back in the exciting world of biotech. I've also established Dr. GPCR, a not-for-profit ecosystem dedicating to uniting stakeholders with a shared interest in G protein-coupled receptors, also known as GPCRs. GPCRs are a family of proteins that allow you to see, smell, and taste, and are also targeted by almost 50% of FDA-approved drugs. Driven by a mission to improve human health through collaboration and innovation in GPCR drug discovery, Dr. GPCR serves as a nexus for scientists and stakeholders from academia and the private sector, fostering dialogue and catalyzing progress in this vital field. With Life Career Job, we aim to empower you, STEM PhD professionals, in your career journeys. In the episodes to come, I will have the privilege of engaging in candid conversations with guests from diverse careers, each offering invaluable insight and wisdom gained from their personal journeys. Together, we would unravel the intricacies of career trajectories, sharing practical advice and inspiration to embolden you in forging your own path towards professional fulfillment. As we launch into this exciting endeavor, I invite you to join us on this journey of discovery. Subscribe to our podcast on your preferred platform and explore our website, where we endeavor to extend our support beyond the confines of the airwaves. Stay tuned for more as together we navigate the boundless horizons of career and life fulfillment. Until next time, stay safe. Hello, everyone. This is Yamina with the Life Career Job Podcast, and not the Dr. GPCR podcast, as I was saying this before we hit record. I have with me today Mark Schmeizl. Mark, welcome to this new podcast episode.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this.
Very excited to have you on. Why don't we start at the beginning? Can you please tell us who you are and what do you do?
Okay, I'm Mark Schmeizl. I am the Chief Matchmaker over at Dr. GPCR. I also own my own recruiting business called Global Recruiters of Windsor. I'm also a husband, married to a piano teacher who is a wonderful, wonderful person, and we are proud parents of a junior at Boston University.
Wow, and I do remember that the move out, the empty nest aspect of life came this year, but we can talk about it in a bit. Where did your career start in general, and how did you become a recruiter?
So my career actually started in the lab. I went to the University of Connecticut, got a bachelor's degree in biology, went directly to the University of Connecticut Health Center, where I was a research associate in the hematology oncology lab. From there, I moved to a company called Packard Instrument Company. They were looking for an application scientist, and as many people are probably quite aware, research associates with a bachelor's degree starve. And so, so the job at Packard seemed very lucrative. And so I made the jump. And then from there, my career just kind of stayed on what I call the commercial side of life sciences. I worked for many companies providing research tools and services. Um, Worked my way up the ladder, got to the point where I was, VP of commercial operations and building sales, marketing, and tech support teams. And in that role, obviously worked with a lot of recruiters because I was hiring and building teams. And what I discovered is that there aren't a lot of recruiters. There's some, but not a lot who really have a deep understanding of our industry. And so my desire to be in business for myself, together with that unmet need, led to me jumping in and starting Global Recruiters of Windsor. And it was through that organization that I met you and was invited to join Dr. GPCR.
That is so, and it's interesting. I want to ask a little bit about the name, the Global Recruiters of Windsor, and where does that come from? But let's stop a little bit at application scientist.
Sure.
I think since this is the second podcast episode that we're recording for Life Career Job, I'm not sure if the audience is familiar with all the different jobs that you can have coming out of academia. What was your job like as an application scientist?
So Packard has, or had, because they were acquired a long time ago, they had instrumentation and chemistries and consumables that were used mostly in high throughput screening, in some other areas in drug discovery. And some of the technologies that they developed were different, cutting edge, new. People had never heard of. A good example is HTRF, which is homogeneous time resolved fluorescence. Everybody's aware of it now, but at the time it was different. And so when the company launched products like that, they needed somebody who understands the science and could explain how this technology fits into the drug discovery process and also help customers to develop assays and implement the technology throughout the organization. And so an application scientist is somebody that's exactly what they do. They go out to pharmaceutical and biotech companies and help those companies to bring new technologies in.
And this is exactly what they're still doing today with
Yep.
other technologies that are coming up.
That's correct. Yeah. It's a great transition job from the lab to the business side of life sciences. And one of the things I think that makes it so wonderful is from an application scientist role, you can move into sales like I did. You could move into marketing. You can move into product development. You really, as the application scientist, that person gets all the feedback from the customers and then provides that feedback to the company. So everybody wants to have a conversation with the application scientist. And so you get the opportunity to really meet most people within an organization, understand what the different departments in an organization are responsible, what they're responsible for executing, and choose a career path that you maybe hadn't thought about because you were in college studying science.
When when you moved into this role of application scientist, did you ever anticipate getting to where you are today?
No, I had.
I think
I had always pictured myself as a scientist when I was young, as a child, through high school, even most of the way through college. And I really did enjoy working in the lab, very much. Um, but I think it's funny because you named this podcast appropriately, life, career, job, because life sometimes pushes you in directions. And for me, what had happened is, as a young man, I had met the love of my life and wanted to get married, but certainly did not have the resources to support, a couple, let alone a family. And so that was one of the things that kind of pushed me towards the commercial side of life sciences, because really I felt at the time that my choices were go back to school and get a more advanced degree or make a change more towards the commercial side of things. And so being the impatient young man that I was, I chose the quick path towards money.
Well, yes and no. I think there's the yes, the quick path towards money, but also you're really good at interacting with people. You really like talking to people. You're pleasant to have a conversation with. So I think marrying this aspect of your personality with the science made you the perfect candidate to be an application scientist.
It's funny you say that because people that I talk to who have made the transition from the lab to what I've been calling the commercial side of life sciences, that's a common thread. They'll say, the lab was wonderful. I enjoyed the science, but socially, it was a bit isolating and they felt like they needed something because you spend, a lot of time working 40 hours plus a week. They needed something that not only stimulated their inner scientist, but also, their the social side of their personality. And that's where a lot of people will find, making a transition to the business side of life sciences and rewarding.
How hard was it? Well, actually, well, I'm gonna ask the question and then give some background to the why I'm asking the
Okay.
question. How hard was it to go from academia to this application scientist role and then to go further into the business side of science? And the reason I'm asking this is because I transitioned as well out of the lab, excuse me, out of the lab into the business side of science for some time. So I did a master's, PhD, two postdocs, you name it. And then COVID hit, and that's when I realized that actually I felt lonely in the lab, not necessarily happy repeating experiments, doing experiments in the lab anymore. And it was very difficult to, I think the term that I've used before is to wash off the box that people put you in when you're a scientist and you say, well, you can't go into sales or you can't do this because you're a lab and bench scientist.
It's a really, really good question. So a couple tiers to the answer, so bear with me. First of all, there was an element of luck for me because I was lucky enough to join a company that had a wonderful culture, and really, open communication. There were mentorship programs within the company, and it really, even though it was an international, I can't remember how many employees. It was like 10,000 employees, something like that. Um, it felt like a family business because people wanted to know your opinion. And, even though you were an entry level employee within the organization, there was this desire to show you what it is to work at the company and to hear what your feedback is and learn about your experiences when you went out in the field and got face to face with the customer. So that helped an awful lot, because like I mentioned before, in that application scientist role, I could see all the different parts of the company, and I ended up with multiple mentors in different departments within the organization. And so, really that helped tremendously. You couple that with being willing to put in the hours and do the work. You have to have a good work ethic, obviously, but there's, I don't know, it's a combination, it's a blend, of hard work and luck. Um, the other thing that I think most people go through when they transition out of the lab into the commercial side of things is it's almost like joining the dark side. You've gone to college, and like I said, I had this vision of myself as a scientist, making discoveries and curing diseases and being in the lab. And when you come to the point in your career where you decide to move away from that, it's almost like you're abandoning something that you had invested a lot of time and effort into. So there's that going to the dark side feeling. I think a lot of people need to come to grips with. What ended up happening though, it was very, very rewarding because I wasn't in one lab looking at one topic and running one set of experiments. I was in multiple labs learning about all these companies and what they're doing, and you know, able to bring game-changing technologies to people who really needed it. And those technologies were, I think, instrumental in moving their research forward. So I might not have been the scientist with the gloves on at the bench, but I know that through a lot of those interactions throughout my career, I was able to bring technologies forward and make people aware of them and show them how to use them in such a way that it did make a difference. So, there's that coming to grips with the change.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Which kind of reminds me of of the opportunity that I got this when I decided I didn't want to work in the lab anymore, and I ended up working at Abcam, which I very much enjoyed, and the culture was amazing. And it was through an introduction through a former colleague during my postdoc who was at the time working at Abcam. And the only thing she did is she called the hiring manager. She said, "Oh, I know this person. Would you like to talk to her?" And it was an interesting interview because the person was asking me questions, and at some point she interrupted and she said, "I have to go." And I think there was something at the end. I think that was saying, "Okay, I'll email you or something." And I was like, "Oh my God, this does not go well." But it turns out that something happened and the person had to go. But I still got the opportunity to talk to two other people on the team. I was able to give a 20-minute talk about a series of products. So they really outlined, and I had a lot of fun um, putting together the presentation because I was looking at the products that I was talking about from a user's perspective. And I think when
Hmm.
you're in the lab and you're using product any consumables, you're the expert at those. And then
Right.
getting into the other side and helping others use those products the best way possible is an advantage.
Hmm. Yep, very true. It's we both were lucky from the standpoint of
Yeah.
having a company with a good culture, starting
Yes,
in a company with a good culture, I should say. And that's
absolutely.
that can be one of the biggest challenges in looking for your next job is how do I uncover what it's really like to work at this company.
Yeah.
Uh, how do I find out what my future bosses, are their expectations realistic, or are
Yeah.
they unattainable? And that's one of the things what I'm doing now. It's one of the things, I'm sorry I'm jumping around on you a little bit here, but
Oh, no,
what I'm
please.
doing now, that's one of the things I like the most because it gives me an opportunity as a candidate is moving through the interview process to really coach those candidates and tell them, remind them, I guess I should say, that in an interview, you're interviewing the other person and the company as much as they're interviewing you. And it's really important to make sure that you have the opportunity to talk to enough people and you feel really comfortable. You feel like you have a solid picture of what the organization is like and what the expectations are, and that you think it is a great next step in your career. And if you can't check all those boxes, then another interview needs to be added or something so that you can get the information you need to make a really, really informed decision.
You make a great point. I recently was talking to someone who's looking for a new postdoc. I know it's not the same thing as going for an industry job, but at the same time, I think some of the rules apply. And the person was unsure and had more questions. And I said, you just email the professor and you ask for 20 minutes because you have more questions. And this one will help you uncover if the professor is willing to spend 20 more minutes with you. And if yes, that's a good sign. If it's no, I think it's a warning sign. And once you get on that call and you get your answers to the questions, that also helps you make a decision. And if we change the interviewee from postdoc to scientist and the professor to hiring manager, it's the same thing.
Yeah, that was fantastic advice. It's it's super. You're absolutely right. You learn a lot by making a request in the interview process, and I think a lot of people feel like, well, whatever the company's interview process, that's what I need to
Yes.
follow.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
and to some extent, you have to be careful that you're not asking too much. But at the same time, if you still have questions and you're not fully convinced, um, it's a risk on both sides, right? Because for the company to make a hire, that person to not work out, that's a long delay for them, and it puts them right back to where they are had they just offered one more interview,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
then, okay, well, this finalist didn't actually accept the offer, but at least they knew right up front, and the company didn't spend, the time and energy and money
Yeah.
on an employee that didn't work out. And so it's really on both sides of the table. It's super important to make sure that, both it's the match, right? And
Yes, hence your chief
that's
matchmaker title, which I think it's absolutely spot on. And we have to record. You came up with it. When I said just be creative, because I think it's important. I always tell people that, finding your next opportunity is a lot like dating. If you don't like the person you're on a date with, if this is 40 hours a week worth of dating, week after week, then it's going to be a long 40 hours a week.
that's true. It's very true.
Nowadays, as a recruiter, what are your days like, and how do you work with candidates and with or companies?
Um, so most of a really good day, I'm on the phone a lot. um,
Okay.
talking to and I try to be organized about it. I had this philosophy going into this that I'd spend the morning working on the hiring manager and company side, and the afternoon working with candidates. Um, and I try to make that
But
happen,
it's
but
hard.
yeah, it's when people are available, that's when I'm on the phone with them.
Yeah.
Um, but so when I'm working with candidates, it's really I want to learn about their career. I want to learn about their goals. Um, so that when we start talking about job opportunities, I'm in my mind thinking about, okay, what makes this a good fit and what doesn't make it a good fit. And I'm sharing that information with candidate as much as I can. Here's why I think it's a good fit. Here's things that we want to make sure we uncover in the interview process. Um, I also, they'll send me their resume, and I will, review resumes and give advice. Um, like I mentioned before in the interview process, I want to be part of that. I want to talk to candidates every step of the way in the interview process. Um, so that we know that they're asking the questions that can uncover the
Yeah.
culture and find out what the expectations are. Um, and then I do what I call marketing. It sounds strange when applied to a person, but a lot of times, a candidate comes to me and I don't have an assignment, that's a good fit, but I have a huge network after 30 years in life sciences. And so I will make that network aware that, hey, I've got this great scientist I'm working with who has done these amazing things. And, are you aware of an opportunity or a job opening out there that would be a good match? So from the candidate side, that's usually how I spend my day. On the hiring manager side, again, it's about learning about the organization, learning about the technology that the organization is founded upon, trying to uncover information about the culture and the management style of the hiring manager. Um, I will review job descriptions just like I'm reviewing resumes. And I'll also, obviously I'm outsourcing and screening candidates and really kind of looking for candidates who have specific experiences, but also, that fit from a personality standpoint. Does the job require somebody to be willing to roll up their sleeves and have the ability to mentor a team? Is it the kind of job where they're going to spend less time at the bench and they need to be comfortable with the data review and the meetings?
Yeah.
Right. And so all of those kinds of things that you try to find out in the process and try to connect the right person to the right role. And so I don't know if that fully answers your question, but that's pretty much how I spend my days.
No, it does answer my questions, which makes me think that, oh my God, there's so many things we can talk about. And I don't know if we've ever recorded this, but you and I met because somebody introduced us, I think,
Hmm.
as you were working on filling a role.
That's
And
right.
that didn't work out, the role. But
Right.
then we worked out.
Right.
And
Well, and that's the networking piece, right?
yes.
And that's well, I think we had a conversation before jumping on this, and I'd
Yeah.
mentioned to you that my business is built on networking pretty much. Um, And it's funny how, I try to be as honest with people as I can when I'm marketing, you know,
Yeah.
their profile to multiple companies. Um, it's serving two purposes, right? It's potentially uncovering opportunities for them, but it's also potentially uncovering new assignments for me, right? So it's
Yeah.
it's from that perspective, it's serving two purposes, and it doesn't always work out that I uncover the opportunity that the person ends up, you accepting.
Yeah.
Um, and the other thing I tell people all the time is, you can work with the best recruiters in the world, but still like 85% of people find their next job through their personal or their professional network,
Yeah.
right? So I'm always reminding candidates, keep calling people, keep, reaching out to people. If you're in an active job search,
Yeah.
go back two or three companies or two or three jobs ago and reach out to those people you haven't talked to in a while. Make sure they're aware that you're looking, what you're looking for. Get into conversations with them about projects you worked on together. So it will remind you of things that you worked on, and it will help you. Those conversations will help you to build your resume and help you to build, um, a repertoire of stories that you can bring up in the interview
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
It's all that, and that's all networking.
It is, and it's so interesting that you mentioned, building up resumes and networking and also the stories and for situational questions and
Hmm.
all of these things. So when I started looking, when I had decided that I would be quitting, say going to the dark side and leaving academia, that's exactly what I did. So I actually have a Google document that lists out all my experiences, and I have 10 bullet points of achievements for all of these, which have quantifiable results. Well, not depending on the experience. And then once you have this repertoire of achievements with quantifiable results, when a job ad pops up and you want to build a resume that is targeted for that position, you don't have to invent anything or think about anything. You just go into your little Google Doc or DocX,
Yeah,
and then in 30 minutes, you have a targeted resume
it's
because you've put in
it's
the work before.
right. It's again fabulous advice. It's your achievements that will separate you from all the other candidates,
Yeah.
right? Because you can all have worked the same senior scientist role, right?
Yeah.
And had very similar responsibilities as a senior scientist, but each individual will have very different achievements, right? That they were able to add to their list when they were in that role.
Yeah.
And so those are the things that make you stand out as an individual in the interview process and when somebody is reviewing a pile of resumes.
Yeah.
Um, so it's funny you mentioned that because that's what I tell people. It's the most common advice I give on resumes is, don't just list your responsibilities, include your achievements, and whenever possible, quantify them. And people
Yeah.
sometimes get nervous about that piece because, am I revealing confidential information, that kind of thing. There's a couple different tricks there. One is convert it to percentages, right?
Yeah.
Increase the throughput of the laboratory by 25%. Um, Reduce the number of false positives in the test by X%, right? There's
Yeah.
a lot of different things that you can do without revealing confidential information that still gives you a quantifiable achievement.
Yeah.
And then don't forget time, right? If you implemented new procedures that reduced the length of time by, cut it in half or cut it by, 25%, that's really important.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so there's a lot of different ways to quantify things. It doesn't have to be, hard numbers. Um,
Agreed. Agreed. And you mentioned time. You mentioned, I'll spit it out. My throat is acting up a little bit. Time, and there was one thing I wanted to mention that you think it completely skipped.
the percentages,
Also percentages, but also cutting costs
right?
or
Excellent.
making things more efficient.
Yep.
Whether it's a system where you're tracking, I don't know, data, and then very quickly you realize that in 3 months you've collected enough. You don't have to go back and redo the experiments a couple of times because
you have tracked it, and every time you generate data, you analyze it, and now you know that you've done the experiment enough times, you're confident in your experiment and your results. And anything that you feel like you've contributed to make the environment better, the lab better, the company better, your team, your performance as a quantifiable result.
It's funny. I was talking to a candidate at the director level, and one of the things that an opportunity I was working on, one of the things they were looking for is mentorship skills. And in the conversation with my candidate, he kept saying how, oh, I love mentoring people, and I said, well, tell me some stories, give me some examples. And he would tell me a story about a person who came into his lab at the junior level, and within a couple of years' time, he had given him new responsibilities, and that person was able to move on to a different department and get a job at a higher level.
Mhm.
And that's really great. Really help that person move their career forward. And he's like, yeah, in one year that happened 4 times in my lab. And I was like, well, there you go. There's a quantifiable achievement. And the first thing he
Yeah.
said to me, really? It's an achievement that I got 4 people to leave my lab?
Yeah,
And it was, yeah, it is an achievement, because the only reason they left your lab is because you helped them to move their career forward. It wasn't that,
exactly.
it wasn't a negative thing.
And
Um,
exactly. No, and I think that's very important to capture. One other thing you mentioned about working with candidates, and you tell them go back 2, 3 jobs and have conversations with your previous colleagues. I think it's hard, but I think the keeping in touch with as many people as possible is something that needs to be done on a regular basis, and not only when you're looking for an opportunity.
Very true.
And keeping in touch doesn't have to be, meetings and Zoom meetings and phone calls. A happy birthday, or happy birthday to your wife, or happy birthday to your son because you've worked with that person.
Yep.
One trick
Yeah.
I have is every time if I meet someone and we become friendly, we have nice conversations, and I happen to they happen to tell me when their birthday is, I put it in my Google Calendar.
Right.
Or I have a friend, and it's so interesting because she's also on the business side, on the sales side of science, and I call her a friend now, but I met her as she was an application scientist. And we started talking. I think we met 3 times in the past 10 years in person. That's it. But we keep in touch. I have in my Google Calendar her children's dates of birth, names. When it's their birthday, I send her a text message. That's it. Takes 2 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's those personal things, I think, that people react to,
Yeah.
the most. And,
Yeah.
um, joining groups that are, I'm sorry, I'm going to shamelessly plug Dr. GPCR, but it's really a wonderful group where you can spend as much time in it as you have available, or as you want to spend in it, or as little, and it'll ebb and flow, and people can spend a lot of time, working with the network and within the ecosystem, and then skip it for a little while because life just got crazy busy.
Yeah.
But those groups, whether it's Dr. GPCR, BioExchange, there's so many of them
Even
out there.
Toastmasters or anything.
Exactly. Exactly. But it's those groups that, you get these reminders, you get invitations to
Yeah.
meetings that are happening, or newsletters that are put out, that just kind of remind you to keep in touch with people, and keep those networks healthy.
Yeah.
Because you're right. It's really super important to do that on a regular basis. The other thing
Absolutely.
that's really great about that, when you're in a job search, and one of the reasons I mentioned, hey, let's talk about the projects that you worked on, because a lot of times people will say things to you that you never would have thought of about yourself. Something like, you mean, if you were not on that project, it never would have gone to completion. And you'd look at me like, what are you talking about? That's me. It's like, yeah, you had this specific skill. Spent those 6 evenings one week, putting in the extra hours that got it over the finish line.
Yeah.
Whatever the things were that you have long since forgotten,
Yeah.
people will remember that about you. And they'll give you credit for things that you probably would never give yourself credit for.
Yeah.
But once somebody says it to you, it's like, okay, I guess I really did contribute to that project in ways I didn't realize.
Yeah.
And it adds to your list of achievements.
Yes, I think that's an absolutely great point. Super great point. I wanted to ask you, whenever you work with candidates and you're trying to help them uncover what is the company culture like,
Mm.
what is their potential manager like, what do you tell them?
So there's lots of different things you can do. One of the things you want to get in early in the interview process is, who's on the interview panel. There'll usually be a list of people who you'll be meeting with. And that gives you an opportunity to kind of take a look at their background. You can go out to LinkedIn and find most everybody now. And
Yes.
you can see how long have they been with the company. And if you've got different people that you're meeting with, one's been with the company for 6 months, one's been with the company for 6 years, there's different questions you're going to ask those two different people, right? The person who's been with the company for 6 years, questions like, what was one of the most difficult things that the company went through? An inflection point in the evolution that really, changed things or had a dramatic impact on the culture, right? Somebody who's been with the company for 6 months, okay, you decided to join the company. Is it everything that you thought it was, or have you learned more since you joined the company that, you know, gives you a different impression? And if so, what are those differences? It can be positive, it can be negative, right? And usually asking somebody a question along those lines, they're not expecting it, they haven't prepared an answer, and so you get a lot more honesty.
Yeah, and it's not a yes or no question.
Always open-ended. Yeah. Always
Yeah,
open-ended.
yeah,
Tell me about is a great way to start a question.
yeah.
If you really want to learn about a company's culture or a manager's, style,
Style. Yeah.
tell me about is a great way to start.
I love it. Love it. And I think it's important also to, well, on Zoom, it's more difficult, but if you get a chance to go and interview in person, also be on the lookout for people's body language, for how they
Yeah.
answer. If the answer is cryptic, then it might not be a good sign. Uh, and
Yeah.
it's, and the other thing I wanted to mention, and I feel like whenever, at least in my case, whenever I was in a position where I was looking for a job, it was very difficult for me to remind myself that I'm interviewing the company just as much as they're interviewing me.
Yeah.
Any advice for candidates who might feel the same way? I think a lot of candidates feel that way.
It's very common. Very, very common. And I think one of the things there's no such thing as a question you can't ask. There's questions you might ask and people don't answer because they can't. It's confidential information or something like that. And okay. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't have asked the question. It just means they're not at liberty to share the information. So I get that a lot. I get, can I ask this question? Absolutely. Yes, you can ask, is the company profitable? You can ask, when's the last time the company raised money and how much money's left in the bank? Are we talking 2 months or 2 years? You can ask those questions. You have to make sure you're asking those questions to the right person on the interview panel, right? You can't ask the HR person about when the last time money was raised because they may not even know, right? Um, you probably don't want to, you probably don't want to ask somebody at the VP level about, hey, what's the day to day in the lab? So things like that, you got to make sure that the question is targeted to the right person, but there's really not anything that's off limits. And if you ask a question that they can't answer, they'll just tell you, and it's okay. It's confidential information. We move along and go to the next question. Um, Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I think people just have this feeling like, oh, I can't ask them when they got funded. Sure, you can.
Yeah. Worst case, they're going to tell you we can't talk about it, which
Right.
is, again, an indication as to what is the culture and the
Hmm.
company and what that looks like. No, I love it. I love it. One question people keep asking me when I talk about recruiters and specifically about our chief matchmaker, Dr. GPCR, is um, from a candidate perspective, what do I have to do to work with a recruiter? Do I pay the recruiter? Or what does that look like from a candidate's perspective?
It's a great question. So, from a candidate's perspective, recruiters get paid when the company hires a candidate, And what we get paid is a percent of that candidate's first year salary. And so the candidate themselves should not have to pay a recruiter. There are, obviously career coaches and people who do, resume writers, people who provide those types of services who will charge for their service, but a recruiter bills the hiring company. Okay, so that's an important thing to know. Working with a recruiter, I think, again, it's kind of just like the job interview. You want to interview the recruiter. How long have you been recruiting? What's your knowledge of this industry? How many people have you placed in a role similar to what I'm looking for? Questions like that are all fair game. And you should, if you're looking for a really technical role, if you're a scientist and you're looking for a principal scientist role, and it's an antibody discovery company, you want your recruiter to know what is an antibody. You want your recruiter to know something about the antibody discovery process, right? That there's differences between antibody discovery and small molecule drug discovery. And those kinds of things are extremely helpful, because then that recruiter will have the ability to qualify the position and know about the company, learn more about the company, and be able to provide you with more information going into the interview process. If you've got a recruiter who's never worked in life sciences and they've just kind of jumped into recruiting, they won't be able to uncover that information for you. So you kind of go into the whole process less informed. So that's one of the things I tell people too, is really kind of drill down, make sure you got somebody who knows which end is up. And that's true on both sides for the hiring manager too. You should definitely, if you are a hiring manager, you should definitely pick recruiters who are going to understand your technology, are going to understand, building a team. Have they built a team of themselves in a previous life before they were a recruiter? And are they going to understand how difficult it is to herd the cats for an interview? If it's a panel interview. So all those things make a difference. And so, again, even just because the service is free doesn't mean you have to work with the first person who calls. You can insist on somebody who's got a bit more depth and experience.
Yeah, and somebody you get along well with. I think that's
Yeah.
also very important.
Yep.
There's in every profession there's good and bad professionals. And I've worked with good recruiters and I've worked with recruiters where I said, well, no, thank you, because we're not a good fit, and it's okay. And I think it's like dating.
Yeah.
You want somebody who's in your corner, who can communicate what you need, who can give you the information that you need about the role, who can really serve as a great intermediate between you and the company that you're looking to start your job at.
And if you've got a recruiter who's bringing you opportunities that are clearly a miss, you're probably not working with the right recruiter. And on the hire manager side, if you've got a recruiter who's bringing you candidates who clearly are a miss, you're probably not working with the right recruiter.
I love it. So let's say I'm coming to you and I'm looking for a position.
Mhm.
And I have no resume, I have no experience. I kind of know what I want to do. What would be your maybe top 3 pieces of advice for me?
So, so you said no resume, no experience. So
Nope.
if
Academic. 20-page CV.
all publications.
Yeah. Exactly. And poster presentations.
Okay, so that's a little bit different. So, just one thing people should know about recruiters, because we're paid by the company for the placement, a lot of companies prefer not to work with recruiters for entry-level roles. Okay. So
Which I didn't know.
Because on entry-level roles, they can go to universities and get a bunch of candidates. They can go to, job boards and get a bunch of resumes, and they can avoid the fee, right? So the company, quite often a company does not work with recruiters for entry-level type roles. That said, so the experience side of things, if you're an academic, if your career has been in academia and you have no experience in industry, that's a different story. So now a recruiter can definitely help you to make that migration, successfully. And that recruiter should be asking you a lot of questions. I get resumes, I read them thoroughly. I looked at profiles online very thoroughly. But the first thing I ask people to do when I'm talking to them after we've kind of gone over the basics of rules of engagement, is tell me about your career. Tell me how you got to where you are, you know, the changes that have taken place in your career. How did you make the decision to make those changes? Trying to learn about the motivations, trying to learn about, and I'm listening to the person talking, and if they start talking about technology and they're getting excited and they're, the pace picks up, okay, this is somebody to whom the technology is super important. It's got to be something interesting and exciting. On the flip side, if they start talking about, mentoring and coaching and teaching people how to use technologies or teaching people how to run experiments, and that's where their tempo picks up and their voice gets excited and animated. Okay, that tells me something else, right? And so usually I'm doing at least 2, if not 3 phone conversations with a candidate to really get to know them, their experience, what they want, and then kind of launching into submitting their profile to a company for an opportunity, getting into the interview process. And the other thing that helps too is now we've got a relationship that's a bit stronger than what you can develop on a single phone call. And so hopefully there's some trust that's been built. And when the interview process does start, that candidate hopefully will come to me and say, hey, Mark, I had this first interview and, it went well, but it was 30 minutes. And at the end of it, I had 20 questions I didn't get to answer. And okay, great. Let's make sure that we know somewhere in the interview process, you're going to get those questions answered. And if you don't, we'll ask for another opportunity to talk to the right person. So it takes more time, but it certainly pays dividends.
That's fantastic, which gets me to my next question. What are the candidates that you typically work with?
So it's changed with time. It's been interesting because my career, as I mentioned, was kind of on the commercial side, building sales, marketing, and tech support teams. So I started there because that's where I grew up. Over time, it's kind of migrated more towards scientific roles. And I think that's because if you listen to my voice and my tempo of talking, if I get started to talk about science and technology and experiments and that's where I get excited, right? And so I've kind of like gone through that same evolution as a recruiter as I try to help candidates go through in the interview process and finding the right job. So now I'm very focused on scientific roles. So I've done everything from scientist up through chief scientific officer, depending on size of company and that type of thing. Most of the companies I'm working with tend to be Boston area companies with a handful in San Francisco, but I think that's probably the nature of our industry more than anything else. Yeah, I mean it's fun working on a variety of roles, but I try to stay focused in science. So it's scientist, senior scientist, principal scientist, director, VP, chief scientific officer.
Really, really cool. All right. So I guess my next question, if you could go back in time, because we were talking about the episode outline. If you could go back in time and you would have some advice for yourself back in the day where you were working in the hematology lab, what would that be?
So that advice would be to find a mentor. I eventually found mentors in my career, but it was later. And had I found mentors earlier in my career, I think I would have made some better decisions earlier on.
Mhm.
Right? Because you talk to people who have been through it and their experience, their insights, the value is tremendous, absolutely tremendous. And they'll ask you questions and tell you things about yourself that you wouldn't ordinarily identify or self-identify. And yeah, find a mentor, join the groups to network, start working on your network immediately. It's never too soon or too late. Your network can never be too big. It gets to a certain size and it just starts getting higher quality, right? And when I say higher quality, what I mean is people who are more specific to the thing that is the direction your career has taken, right? Early on, you'll probably have people who are GPCR scientists and some who are antibody discovery scientists and some who are, more focused on biochemical type research and small molecule. And so then your career will start to take a direction and a focus, hopefully based on your personal interests. And you may find yourself, a GPCR expert. And then your network will start to draw into that specific area of interest. And that's what I mean by higher quality. It's not that the other people that you have met weren't valuable people and giving you valuable advice. It's just at that time it was hugely valuable. And today, maybe you've gotten more focused and the advice of somebody who is looking at kinases won't necessarily, or in the genomics, area, won't necessarily be as important to a GPCR scientist who's looking at, ligand binding.
I love it. I love it. Which got me to my next question is, how do you find a mentor? I think because, people say, oh, you should find a mentor. Okay, but how do you do that? You walk up to somebody and say, I like you, you want to be my mentor? That's awkward.
What's funny is so here's the funny thing about it. I've talked to people about this a number of times, and that question you've just asked is very, very common. And what people discover after they ask that awkward question is that the person to whom you ask that question is actually quite flattered. And so you're paying a very high compliment to somebody when you're asking them, hey, would you mind occasional conversations where you give me some career advice, or, if I've got things that are happening that are just, too many moving parts and I can't make sense of it, I could, do you mind if we took 5 minutes and, I could bring this to you and you could just kind of give me your perspective. People are usually flattered, about that. And so, yeah, it feels awkward. It feels, and I think the thing to do too is, kind of tell them up front why you want that person to be your mentor. I have noticed that in this organization, when there is we'll take it outside of science. So when there is a cultural issue or people are, kind of at odds with one another, you're usually the one that steps in and finds the common ground and helps them to, to find a path forward. And that's a skill I really, really want to work on and develop within myself, right? Would it be okay, if once a month we spend 5 minutes, had a cup of coffee and talked about, how to develop those skills, because I'm looking for a mentor. And I think that's what a high compliment.
Wow. Really, really nicely put. I love it. People could write down what you just said, change a couple of things, and then use that to send an email or to walk up to someone. But I think it's really valuable, and thank you for that. Unfortunately, these things are not taught during a master's, a PhD, or even postdocs, and this is absolutely missing from the training that scientists get in academia.
That's very true.
You learn it the hard way.
You learn it the hard way until you found a mentor.
Exactly. Exactly. No, absolutely. Could not agree more.
So the other thing real quickly about mentors,
please.
They'll at different stages of your career, there'll be different people who are the right person to be your mentor. It's not always the same person for 20 years. Sometimes it is, but it's not always. And especially if you make that transition from academia to industry, you're probably going to want different mentors for those different environments. And so, it's the kind of thing that you got to get comfortable doing. You got to get comfortable to explaining to people, this is something I admire about you, and would you mind if we took a little time, a cup of coffee a month so I can work on those skills.
No, I think this is super, super valuable. And I met through not yet this podcast, but through the Dr. GPCR podcast, fantastic people who I consider as my mentors, and we ended up becoming friends. And some of these people have 20, 30 years of experience, you know, in the future or in the past behind them, where if and anything happens, I can just call them up and say, do you have 5 minutes? I have this issue and I don't know what to do about it. What do you think?
Yeah.
And it's been such an amazing feeling knowing that you have someone that you can call up or email and say, I need just 5 minutes just to, you know, get your advice, your perspective. That doesn't mean that you have to do what they tell you to do, but at least you get somebody who can hold up the mirror sometimes and say, well, look, this is what you've done. You should be proud, or you should work on this. Because I think it should go both ways as well.
You know, what's funny is like one of the best days that will happen is when the opposite happens, when your mentor calls you and says, I need your opinion on this.
Yes.
Wow, what a,
Yeah.
really? Okay.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that just is a fantastic day, so, and that
Absolutely.
only happens by having mentors and like we've been talking about, nurturing those relationships and keeping the communication channels open.
Yeah. Yeah. Just being open and talking to people. And this goes also for introverts, although it's harder and people think that I'm an extrovert, which I'm not. I'm actually 51-49, and it can go either way. And I always like to tell people that I have a certain number of extrovertness coins during the day. And once those are used up, I just don't want to talk anymore because it's just too much to handle. But I think it's a matter of practicing. It's a matter of also trying to put yourself out there and very slowly getting into the habit of talking to one person from, one person a day. Not a
Yeah,
big deal, and then it grows.
it's funny. That's maybe one of the reasons you and I get along well, because I remember early in my career, one of the companies I worked for did a DISC assessment, and I landed smack dab right in the middle, right between introvert and extrovert.
Okay.
And I remember when the trying to remember, it was probably the HR, it was probably the head of HR, and she was saying to me how it's very rare that people are usually one or the other, but people who fall like literally bam right in the middle,
Yeah.
a very, very small percentage of the population. So it's probably one of the reasons that you and I get along.
I did. That's good to know. I didn't know that it was very specific. That it wasn't that it was either one or the other, and there's not a lot of people who are in the middle. But yes, I think that might be a good reason. And I'm curious now about the colors, because you mentioned the disc assessment, and I did one last year in October, and I ended up being more yellow, which is the outgoing, the talkative, the relationship builder, you know, on a natural perspective, and the acquired, um, not attitude, but the acquired version has more red. So it's more the CEO type of thing, but it's not too high in the sense that when you're red to 100%, apparently you're the speedboat and nothing else matters. And you're kind of the Elon Musk of personality wise, but mine is high enough, meaning that I can make my own decisions, but at the same time I enjoy talking to people and getting people's perspectives so that I can make an informed decision.
It's been quite a while for me, so I don't remember the colors. I'll have to
I'm
see if I can
curious.
find it, because they actually gave me the results and I took them home. I'll have to see if I probably still have it somewhere. But that changes too, right?
Yes.
Your disc assessment will change over your career and throughout your life. You know,
Yes.
my daughter has changed a lot in my personality. She's 17 years old. She's gonna be 18 on tomorrow. And
Happy
I
birthday.
almost said on Saturday and realized it's Friday. But just being a parent and watching her development and how she's, found certain things to be easy and other things to be challenging, and um,
Yeah,
helping her get over the things that are challenges, it just changes your own set of skills, and it strengthens
absolutely.
certain ones that weren't necessarily your strong points in the past, and then you
Yeah.
find out through being a parent or through having a specific job or teaching a class. These experiences in life that really, you never saw yourself doing these things, and then you're in the thick of it and you're going, huh, that was kind of fun.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And to your point, I did do 2 disc assessments, one in 2020, I think, and then the other one in 2022. And I was at 2 different points in my life with each, and it was polar opposites. The results were completely the opposite of one another, which is a very interesting thing. I think it goes back to the fact that you first have to know yourself,
Yeah.
to then figure out what do you want to do, to then think about who would you like to be surrounded by, would you prefer talking to, what kind of work do you like to do, and then go from there and be more on the, I want to say, checklist type of thing, where you have your list of accomplishments, your resume, your story is ready, find the right recruiter, find the right job, and then build a career, hopefully, and a life around that.
Yeah, that well said. Very, very well said.
Any other words of wisdom from you, Mark, tonight?
Any other words of wisdom? So we talked a lot about mentors and networking. I think the one thing that maybe we didn't spend enough time on is people everybody winds up in a place in their career where they're unexpectedly looking for a job. And it's actually a good opportunity to kind of recharge, self-evaluate, have all those conversations with people that you've lost touch with, take a little bit of time to just get over the breakup.
Pretty much
and 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 make sure that you're making the next career decision well informed and it's the right one. Because a lot of times people feel an urgency to find the next job, and it may not be the right job, and it may take their career in a direction that they don't want it to go, and that turns into a section of their life they'd rather forget.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
think if you have the luxury of
Yeah.
doing some popcorn plus Netflix to get over the breakup, then please do take it. And it's interesting because something bad happens and then it's the end of the world, at least momentarily in the person's head. But I think it's very difficult to do this. Having gone through this, it's very difficult to ask yourself, okay, so what does this bad experience bring me as a new possibility?
Right.
What's the possibility behind it? And it's hard to get your head out of that. It's not fun to be told thank you, but you will not be coming, we don't need you anymore for XYZ reason.
It's never easy.
It's never easy. But then if you have your network, if you have your resume ready, if you have your mentor, if you have your village that can support you, then it's not as difficult to bounce back.
Yep. Very true. And we all have that village, whether we think we do or we don't.
Yeah.
We do. Everybody has that village. And that's where you just kind of the reach back and cup of coffee with people you've lost touch with.
Yeah.
It's just pays dividends.
It does. So. It does. All right. I think we can go on and on and on and on.
You make it so easy. You really do. You make this it's conversational and easy to do. People, I think going into a podcast and geez, what's this going to be like? And am I going to be a good guest? And it was just so simple and an easy conversation. So you're an excellent host. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I really enjoy. This is where I come alive. And when things happen, I really enjoy doing these things. So I think it also comes through when people listen. I have to say, I don't listen back to my podcast episodes because every episode But I really do enjoy recording these, and I think I'm very excited about Life Career Job, the podcast, and the platform that we're building around it.
It's a wonderful idea, and I think the value it's going to bring to the entire scientific community is really fantastic. So thank you so much for putting all the effort into making it a reality.
Thank you, Mark. I really enjoyed our conversation. Don't go anywhere. We're going to stop recording.
Okay.
And we're going to let
Thank
people
you again
wonder.
for the invitation.
Of course. Thank you so much. And obviously, you and I will see each other in a bit as as you are our chief matchmaker at Dr. GPCR. All right. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Yameen.
Moving from academia to industry is challenging. Dear listeners, welcome to the Life Career Job podcast. Join us as we explore the inspiring journeys of STEM PhD scientists who have successfully transitioned from academia to the dynamic world of biotech, biopharma, VC, and beyond. Discover the diverse roles of our guests as they open up about their current and past positions. They shed light on their day-to-day responsibilities, the impact of their work, and their work-life balance. Whether it's in research and development, leadership roles, or even investment banking, each episode provides a unique perspective on the thriving opportunities within these roles. We'll also bring you expert advice on everything from how to dress for an interview, how to negotiate your employment package, how to ask for a promotion, and beyond. Life Career Job is a platform that we are building to help you navigate the challenges of finding your dream STEM job and building your ideal career path so that you can have the whole life that you want. We hope to serve as a beacon of guidance and inspiration in the tumultuous seas of STEM career path exploration. I am your host, Dr. Yamina Bershish, a passionate advocate for career advancement and the creator behind the very successful Dr. GPCR podcast and ecosystem. I obtained my PhD in biochemistry at the University of Montreal. This was followed by 2 postdocs, one at the Rockefeller University in New York City and a second at the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland. Less than 11 months before COVID-19 hit, I moved to a senior scientist position at a small biotech company here in the Boston area. Since then, I've worked in sales and marketing at a global life sciences company and in commercialization at a nonprofit organization. And I am now back in the exciting world of biotech. I've also established Dr. GPCR, a not-for-profit ecosystem dedicating to uniting stakeholders with a shared interest in G protein-coupled receptors, also known as GPCRs. GPCRs are a family of proteins that allow you to see, smell, and taste, and are also targeted by almost 50% of FDA-approved drugs. Driven by a mission to improve human health through collaboration and innovation in GPCR drug discovery, Dr. GPCR serves as a nexus for scientists and stakeholders from academia and the private sector, fostering dialogue and catalyzing progress in this vital field. With Life Career Job, we aim to empower you, STEM PhD professionals, in your career journeys. In the episodes to come, I will have the privilege of engaging in candid conversations with guests from diverse careers, each offering invaluable insight and wisdom gained from their personal journeys. Together, we would unravel the intricacies of career trajectories, sharing practical advice and inspiration to embolden you in forging your own path towards professional fulfillment. As we launch into this exciting endeavor, I invite you to join us on this journey of discovery. Subscribe to our podcast on your preferred platform and explore our website, where we endeavor to extend our support beyond the confines of the airwaves. Stay tuned for more as together we navigate the boundless horizons of career and life fulfillment. Until next time, stay safe.